So hello if you're new here, and welcome back if this is not your first rodeo. This is the Coffee and Craft podcast. My name is Kim, and what I do here is I drink way too much coffee, and I just I talk to you about all things to do with running a handmade business, and I just try and keep you company while you work or craft, really. As handmade sellers, finding ways to promote our business can be quite challenging and tricky to find the best way to do it sometimes, but it is a challenge that we tend to create for ourselves, I think. We follow strategies that aren't made for us, and that's a problem. Handmade needs to be promoted differently because it's different. And it's often dismissed as not being as important as other things. We've all heard the hippies at the flea market analogy. Yep, big fan of that one. So why then do we think that a marketing strategy that is made for something like a print-on-demand business or a corporate retail business, why do we think that that would work for us? Often these are strategies made with completely different businesses in mind. It's not just about what we sell, it's also about how we sell it, who we're selling it to, where we sell. And I'm going to circle back to the who we sell to in a bit. And it's not just handmade sellers that have to be different. Vintage sellers, they have to think differently about how they promote and how they sell their items, because unlike someone selling something handmade or otherwise, you can't constantly relist the same thing. It's one of a kind, so you have to come at it from a very different angle. And I think this is at the core of why so many handmade sellers struggle to promote their businesses effectively when they're applying these strategies to their business. Because these strategies can be things like have X amount of items in your shop at any one time. And that can be problematic if what you make and sell takes a long time to make. Throwing a small fortune every day at ads, for a smaller business, it just doesn't make sense. Or the constant obsession with creating systems and funnels and just optimizing the stuffing out of everything. No, I should point out, I'm being a little bit tongue-in-cheek with that last one. I do think handmade businesses as well can benefit from focusing some attention on creating systems and optimizing their shops just so that they're a bit more organized and that they flow a little bit better. But there can be a bit of an obsession and an extreme lean into that, whereas people are trying to create businesses that are as hands-off as possible, which might work for some, but you can see why that doesn't work for a handmade seller. Who the very definition of handmade means hands-on. So to try and apply processes and things that constantly take you away from that, what you're actually creating is a disconnect. And I'm going to come to that too. The connection bit, so important. Anything that kind of creates a divide there, not so good. And unfortunately, it does lead to some handmade sellers feeling that their business is less of a business because it's not a certain size. They can't generate products to the same degree as another business can, and they're not applying, business-esque terminology to it. My darling, no. Many of us are working from our kitchen tables. Many of us are working from our kitchen tables for a reason. We want to. This is what we want. We do not want that. I've already made a video on this, so I'm not going to go into that again. And if the idea of somebody just wanting a small business that they can do at their kitchen table made you sneer, then Carol, you are in the wrong place. Said with love, light and sparkles. And a little dollop of sarcasm. As I said at the very start, I make my videos for handmade sellers, and we need to do different. The strategies that work for other kinds of businesses don't work for handmade for the simple reason the customers are different. If you are a handmade seller, you've probably heard someone at some point telling you that people don't care about handmade anymore. Handmade is dead. That is hooey. Not the word I wanted to say, but we're going to try and keep it clean. They absolutely do. And the fact that last year I spent a freaking age scrolling through pages and pages of stuff on Etsy trying to find handmade cups is proof of that. I mean, the irony of me saying that holding a print-on-demand mug is not lost on me, but for those who don't know, I make these sort of like handmade stuff, hand embroidery, but I do have some of my hand embroidered designs on some print-on-demand cups. Only 3, not a big deal, but it does mean that I feel like I can say with some first-hand experience that there is a huge difference between the two types of businesses. But the point I'm trying to say is that the buyers for handmade, that are specifically looking for handmade, they're out there. They always have been and they always will be. It's factually incorrect to say that people don't care about handmade. I think when I hear this said, it's usually used to talk about Etsy and people selling handmade on Etsy, and I think it would be more accurate to say that perhaps Etsy is attracting a different kind of customer now, and therefore although Etsy will still attract people looking for handmade, it is very difficult to find because it tends to be buried by print on demand and digital. No disrespect, I'm not having a pop, I'm just saying that stuff tends to be more in demand on that platform as well, so it attracts that kind of customers. This is kind of hard to talk about without it making it sound like an us versus them, and I do want to point out that I do think that print on demand, digital, any other kind of niche, I do think everyone has its place on the platform, but I do think that it's just getting to the point now where it's too saturated with too many different kinds of things that you cannot find what you're looking for. And this is why a video or two ago I made the call for a handmade, specifically a handmade category for handmade items, not print on demand. That ruffled some feathers, as I knew it would. The reason being though, it's not to out print on demand, because I know that a lot of people don't like print on demand. I do think it has its place. I know, you might think that I would be anti-POD. I'm not. But I do think it isn't handmade. I'm sorry. I know Etsy has gone, yeah, it's fine, it's cool. It's not handmade. And I do think there needs to be a handmade category and a print on demand category. And yep, you can disagree with me if you like, but that's just my belief and I'm sticking to it. She says as she drinks out of her POD mug. But that, just to clarify, that means I also think that these cups that I've designed should not be in the handmade category. I stand by that. Handmade, not handmade. Still has a place, but not handmade. Let's move on. But yes, there will always be customers looking specifically for handmade items. Always have, always will. And they tend to have their own connection to the handmade or the crafting community to some degree, even if that's only as a collector. So you can think of things like ceramics, pottery, art, that kind of thing. They don't just like the items, they really appreciate the time and the skill behind it, and they assign value to that. When they buy an item, they're buying the time it took to make that item as much as the finished item itself. I know so many of these people in real life, so that's why when people say handmade is dead, people don't care about handmade, I'm like, no, the people that you hang out with don't care about handmade, or the people that you work with don't care about handmade. But it's wrong to make a sweeping statement like that as a fact. Because it's just so untrue. But yeah, I touched on the community aspect to it, and community plays a massive part. And when I say community, I'm talking about anywhere online where buyers, customers can connect with makers, and emphasis on the word connect. Artists, makers, buyers of handmade, they hang out on social media and they like to connect and talk to other like-minded people, other makers, indie artists, that kind of thing. It's more of a, I was going to say, lifestyle, vibe, whatever. It's more than just the finished products. It's a whole thing. For example, when I'm buying, my buyer behavior is very different when I'm looking for something that's, I don't know. When I was looking for headphones, the way I searched for the headphones was very different to when I was searching for help. Okay, the only thing that I have to hand on my D&D dice. I was looking for handmade, I was not. So I did not put quite as much effort into finding these. I just wanted some that weren't going to break on me after a few weeks, and these I cared about greatly. Very, very different ways of looking for and finding what I wanted. And I had someone in my Instagram DMs last week ask me why I still chose to, how did they put it? It was a bit snarky, but that's fine. I don't care. Why do I choose to sell on Etsy if I have such a problem with it? I don't have a problem. Well, I do. That's fair. But why? Because when I'm looking for handmade, I will still go there. It's a pain in the neck and it has its problems, and I will highlight those problems for as long as I'm on there as a seller. That's going to annoy some people, but again, okay. But yeah, it's still a good place for handmade if you can find it. That's the issue. It's just awash with non-handmade, and it's very difficult for someone who doesn't want that to find the handmade that is on the platform. I keep on talking about Etsy because it's still really the only platform that has any kind of connection to handmade that is global. I know that there are other places, we do have other places here in the UK, but they're just not as big. People don't really know about them. So Etsy is still the place to go at the moment. And I used to be able to just go onto the platform, stick in a search term, and I would find stuff, and I'd be able to, you know, start searching for things through that search term. I might tweak the search term, I might just scroll through pages, etc., etc. Nowadays though, I do find that I'm finding things on Etsy through other places. I have found items that I've liked and bought on Pinterest and also Instagram, and occasionally here on YouTube too, if I stumble across somebody's studio vlog and they're you know, showing the process behind you know, just their everyday working days, etc., etc. But it's kind of why I wanted to make this video, because with each and every single one of those things, there's been an element of diving in, looking into the maker. There's always been a bit of a community aspect as well. For example, when I'm looking on Pinterest, I'm looking at similar items. I'm looking at handmade specifically. There aren't any like print-on-demand mugs jumping in there going cooey. It's like, that's great, but I'm looking for a bookmark. And I have noticed an uptick actually in the amount of new buyers and new sellers and items that I love and have bought from videos that I've found, either reels on, I was going to say TikTok, that's not the one, Instagram. So the point that I'm trying to make is that as handmade sellers, it's important to create a community or to be part of one. If you are selling to a certain kind of community, I do think it's important to be a part of that community, not just trying to sell to it, but also contribute to it from a non-monetary point of view, if that makes sense. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the YouTuber here, what's her name, Emma in the Moment. She does lots of really great videos. I love them. One of them was she covered the drama that happened in the knitting community after a couple of guys behind knitting.com decided to try and make a buck off the community without knowing jack about it or being in it. They basically took a pop at grannies who knit with old blog posts or something. That kind of got my hackles up, because as a beginner knitter who knows very little about how to knit but loves it anyway, who do you think I'm most likely to take advice from? A granny with an old blog who's got 40 plus years of experience of knitting, or some dudes with a website and a domain name who know nothing about it and don't really care? I'm going with the granny. But I think another reason that this annoyed me so much was because it reminded me of the whole dismissive handmade sellers are hippies at the flea market attitude again. This whole thing of, oh, they don't know how to do it. Yeah, they've been in the community for years and years. They have all of this experience, but no, it's us. It's us with our strategies and our corporate thinking, and it's just business attitude. We are the ones who know best how to make revenue from a handmade business. It was all sort of intertwined, and yeah, no. Anyway, my point, Emma in the Moment, go and have a look for that video. It was really good, and if you don't want to watch it, then I'll just spoil it for you. The knitting community got them told, and it was a beautiful thing. This is where so many handmade sellers go wrong. We have to be a part of the community, or at least we have to create our own community. And we can't just be constantly buy this, buy this, buy this. We have to contribute as well. Now, I've often talked about the importance of building a community around your business in the past, but I haven't really ever talked deeply on what that looks like, and there's a reason for that. I don't want to risk having to make a video that, is essentially a bunch of tips and tricks on how to create a community. You can't fake it. It's something that I don't think people can do if they genuinely don't like talking to people on the internet. I've always done it. Anybody remember LiveJournal? I love that platform. Showing my age a little bit there, but this comes easy to me. If it doesn't come easy to you though, if you don't actually like talking to people on the internet in comments or being a part of a community, trying to use a community to, grow your business is just jaded and a bit manipulative and icky. And it's not going to work because people will know. It doesn't mean running around the internet in comment sections and groups and just hawking your stuff. It means actually talking to people and creating connections, genuine connections, not trying to create a connection just because you want something in return. That's what I mean by manipulative and icky, and people know. Of course you want to promote your business, and talking to people does help you get your name out there, but you have to contribute more. You have to give more. You have to create content, for example, that either sort of offers advice or help in some way, or is just flat out entertaining just because. And I do wonder sometimes if that's why some sellers don't want to do this, because it is slower and it does take more work. And in this day and age of the internet, at least, it does mean having to make some kind of video content. And there are a lot of people who just don't want to do that, which is fine. It's just that you are automatically at a disadvantage if you don't make some sort of video content to promote your business online these days, because that's unfortunately just the nature of the beast at the moment. I mean, look, you're watching my video and most of you will have found me through video. You think of anyone, any maker or creator that you follow online, have you watched or consumed some of their video content in some form or another? Of course, you don't have to make video content or create a community around your business if you don't want to. Please don't take this as a should. I try and say this as often as possible, but you know your business better than anybody else and you know what's good for it and what isn't. Do think, for true handmade sellers, I was going to say the trick, but it's not a trick. The key to growing your business, you're not going to like it. I personally believe that it's the slower, and it takes graft, and it's to do with community and also embracing video to some degree. Even if that's just short form, it's the way to get in front of people, and it's probably the best way to connect with your community as well. I've often spoken about community being so beneficial both ways. Even forget about the financial transactions as well. Some of the connections that I've made within my community are just so far-reaching. It's just sometimes I can be flat energy-wise and I can see a really lovely comment and it sounds trite and like, oh yeah, you like nice comments. But no, sometimes the comments just sort of like, they're more than just everyday niceties. Sometimes they're exactly what you need to hear in that moment when you might be thinking, you know what, why don't I just sack this all in? I'm having a really bad day, month, whatever. And sometimes just a well-timed, lovely comment that somebody's written from the heart, warm and fuzzies people. It's priceless. But if you create a community, you have to work on it, you have to nurture it, you have to bloody care for it. So you can't just be creating one with the dollar signs at the other end. That can't be your only, words difficult, motivation. And that's usually a good sign that I need to wrap the video up. But I will end by just saying, if you have been thinking about making video content, I do have a Patreon. Yes, I'm going to be talking about my Patreon, so you can click off now if you don't like that. But I have a Patreon community where I essentially talk all things YouTube. But again, from a handmade seller perspective. It's very niche, so it's not going to be for 99% of you. But yes, if you have a handmade business and you've been thinking about creating a YouTube channel and making YouTube videos to sort of build your community and grow your business, then you can definitely check it out. There's no pressure. I post a video every week, except for the last week at the end of each month, where I open up submissions for channel audits, and I give everybody a bit of a review and just some suggestions as to how they can keep growing and improve, etc. And we're just about to jump into a very exciting part of it. So the last couple of months we've been working on sort of like the boring but very important fundamental building blocks of a channel, and we're about to jump into the actual video content, and I cannot wait. So if you do join me over there, it's an exciting time for you to do so. But if video content isn't for you, don't worry. As I said before, you know what's best for you better than anybody else does. Take what serves you and just leave the rest. And lastly, if you are a handmade seller, remember that you get to build your business and promote it and grow it in the way that you want to. You don't have to apply all of these strategies made for other kinds of businesses to your own. You can literally create what you want, and you can cherry pick what works for you and just yeet the rest out of the window. Including what I say, FYI. It has to work around you and your life. You get to build the kind of business that you want and you need on your terms, and this little hippie from the flea market thinks that's kind of cool. All right, until next week. Peace.